Garland, I'm sorry to expose you to all this obscenity, but it is the zeitgeist in Britain today, I must say. And I know by American standards these things are quite horrifying. But let me start by asking you if anyone else in the United States has made the connection, let me put it that way, between sending billions and billions of dollars to scores of billions of dollars to Ukraine and to Israel when you can't even put out fires in the heart of America's iconic Hollywood. Does anybody make that connection?
Well, I would argue that Martin Luther King made that connection back in the 1960s when he said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Now, I'm not saying that in that I want bad things to happen to California or to the people of California. Certainly I don't. However, in this particular instance, you would have to listen to that quote and look at what's going on there and hope that maybe some of the people in that region could wake up to reality and understand that we literally saw people burned to death in tents, and that exact same punishment, if that's the right word, is being visited upon the people who have used their power in the media to cover up and excuse those kinds of activities.
It is, I mean, it's undeniable fact that the money that was sent to little Zelensky and Netanyahu, if it had been spent on America's own infrastructure, well, the reservoirs wouldn't be empty. The ocean would have been desalinated. The fire hydrants would have worked. The fire department would not have suffered a massive cut in its numbers and in its equipment. I mean, morally, it is an extraordinary damnation of the political class in the state of California, who are, of course, all Democrats.
Well, as a perfect example of what you're saying, the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, she's a former member of Congress. She's also the former vice chair for the National Endowment of Democracy. Up until last year, even when she was the mayor, she was still on the board of the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA's regime change operation that pretends not to be a CIA regime change operation. When this disaster went down, she was in fact in Ghana on some foreign policy mission. What that has to do with her duties as the mayor of Los Angeles, I don't know. She cut $17 million recently from the budget of the fire department in Los Angeles. They fired a number of firemen who refused to take the, shall we say, safe and effective option that was offered to them by the city of Los Angeles. So, I mean, when you look at this disaster, there is certainly a line of activity that points to this coming. And here's the weird thing. In recent months and years, there's been, particularly in recent months and even weeks, there have been a great number of people who have had their fire insurance canceled. And then a bunch of fires started when we're not even in fire season, kind of serendipitously, simultaneously, after all of these people got their fire insurance canceled, fires started all over the place. It's really strange what's going on in California.
It is very strange. And, of course, the Liberals claim it's about climate change. Others see arsonists running wild on the streets. I've seen the videos myself. What is the real story about these fires, do you think?
The truth is, right now, we don't know the real story about how they're started. But I think there are so many other things to discuss here because we may never know how they started. Certainly, it's kind of strange that they all started just before we had all of these like 80-mile-an-hour gust of winds. It was, kind of the perfect storm, actually, technically. Absolutely the perfect storm here for this kind of disaster. But the issue goes back to government response, that the system is, I would like to say it's broken, but it's not broken. It works exactly as it should. We can go to East Palestine in Ohio, Pennsylvania, with the train turning over. The government at the time, Joe Biden was too focused on getting money, getting $60 billion for Kiev to deal with that. We can look at what happened recently in the North Carolina, Tennessee region with the catastrophic floods, and they offered people $700. At the same time, they were sending another $10 billion overseas. And of course, Joe Biden responded very effectively to this particular paying this particular incident by giving another $500 million to Ukraine. So perhaps if the people in Los Angeles would move to Kiev, they could get a few dollars to help them out in this particular incident.
For a few dollars more. It's Lee Van Cleef's 100th birthday, by the way. The Resnicks, tell me about them. I mean, 50 years ago, I remember Faye Dunaway and Jack Nicholson in a movie called Chinatown, which was precisely about ruthless capitalists owning water resources and starving the people of them in order to make a private profit. That was seems to me, as I recall it, it's many years since I saw it, that was the whole thesis of the film. And now, life imitates art. This couple, the Resnicks, bought up all the water resources in the state of California. How is that even possible?
The fact is, here's the sad thing. We'll never be able to answer that question. That's the sad thing, because there was a secret meeting some years ago in which the water resources were transferred to the Resnicks. This was water, again, neoliberal outsourcing. The people of California own their water resources. I mean, they are water, should anybody even own them in the first place. But whatever the case, certainly there has to be infrastructure to move the water in a desert environment such as California. But the Resnicks were able to have some kind of a secret meeting, and I would imagine they were one of the top donors for Dianne Feinstein and very, very close friends with the Feinstein family. So I would imagine that may have had something to do with it. But there's the infamous secret meeting, and afterwards they got control of a significant portion of the water resources. Now they have farms, I understand, like 3 times the size of San Francisco, pistachio, all kinds of things like that. They've been accused in the past of subverting the water resources from some of the regions where the people needed it to some of their farms. So you see the neoliberal game, a secret corrupt meeting with very, very powerful people that we'll never know about. And in the end, the people get burned to death. And there's no water in the hydrants of all things. But we were protected. We were protected because they fired a lot of firemen because they refused to take the safe and effective option. So I guess somehow that must have saved some lives, according to the people in charge.
Wow. I think Newsom his goose is cooked now. His political ambitions surely at an end. But let's switch gear, Garland. It's the big day coming up. This is the 12th, so Joe Biden's in for another 8 days. Let's stop talking about him and talk about how it looks to you. What kind of whirlwind is Trump going to come in with? Some of it is unexpected. He retweeted an interview by Jeffrey Sachs in which Jeffrey describes the sinister, dark and sinister personality of Benjamin Netanyahu and how he's been trying to drag America into war with Iran for decades. And Trump retweeted that. And then Netanyahu declared he was no longer coming to the inauguration. Is this a straw in the wind?
I certainly hope that is an indication that Donald Trump will have a more realistic foreign policy. He also had a video there's another video out of Donald Trump where he talks about the conflict in Ukraine, and he makes it clear that he sees the the expansion of NATO as being at the root of the problem. So it sounds to me like there is some realism there, that maybe he has some people around here around him that's realistic. I know there are at least two people who are likely to be in his administration who have admitted that they watched the Duran. I think we probably have the alternative media effect going on here, where there are people in Trump's administration who are watching and listening to alternative media and maybe getting some more realistic perspectives. One of the things that Donald Trump's going to have to deal with is the sabotage. We see that just this week, Joe Biden admitted that the latest Russian oil sanctions will increase inflation on the American people, and one would have to imagine that that is the intent. Certainly, the Biden administration will likely do other things to try to sabotage the Trump team's ability to move forward. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump's going to be good or great or bad or anything. We have no idea how things are going to work. But certainly there are promising signs as far as foreign policy. And certainly there will be ones that make us, scream and cry at the same time, no doubt, knowing Donald Trump.
Well, the Ukraine track is, of course, one of the most obvious ones. And there seems little doubt that President Trump is going to ditch Zelensky. Zelensky will have to be replaced because that's the only basis on which the Russians will talk to the Ukrainian government. I mean, their attitude is, why should we speak to the monkey? We want to speak to the organ grinder. And the organ grinder is the President of the United States. So it seems likely to me that the Ukrainian regime is on its last legs. I mean, on the battlefield itself, Russia is carrying all before it. And if they don't get round a table soon, there'll be nothing to get round the table about. But one of the things that I was keen to talk to you about was big tech. The Trumpites, the MAGA people, the right, the Musks, they made a big thing about the Democratic Party being the party of censorship and under the guise of fact-checking and all the rest, and made out at least that they would usher in a new free speech era. And it's already had some impact. You've got Zuckerberg on his knees at Mar-a-Lago, throwing money at Trump for the inauguration ball and sacking his fact-checkers, describing them in the most extreme terms. Should we be hopeful that at least to some extent life will be freer for commentators like thee and me under this Trump administration?
I think there are some indications that we should be hopeful. I do think a lot of that depends on what happens in the Middle East and the Gaza conflict, because one of the fears or concerns that I have is that under the Democrats, the Ukraine conflict was used as the impetus for censorship. Anything that you said, you're a Putin's lover or whatever the case may be, so you had to be censored. And it is possible that if or maybe one could argue even likely, that if the Gaza conflict is not mitigated in some way, that it will be replaced. They will replace the Ukraine conflict as the reason for censorship with the certainly with the issue of Zionism. So many of us are concerned. We see signs with what's happening in Meta, and the pushback from the liberal class, I think, is a positive thing, because if the liberal class is angry, something good must be going on. But will that be replaced with you're an anti-Semite and you hate Israel, and so therefore you have to get the same treatment as before? I think that remains to be seen, and that's a concern that people should be ready to make some noise about if it becomes the case.
Now, Netanyahu is not coming to the ball. Have you got your invitation? You're just round the corner. Are you going to at least take a look at the inauguration?
Yes, I've actually been invited to speak at least one event so far, so I imagine I'll be in the vicinity. Right now, I would say my advice to Donald Trump is going to be hide somewhere in a bunker. until such time, you haven't gotten in office yet, and we've seen them take a couple of swipes at Donald Trump. So right now he's not president. He needs to be very, very careful. But I'm very close, just on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., and I will be speaking at some events, and I will be involved in some of the things going on. I imagine there'll be some protests against Donald Trump, but based on the margin of victory, I can't imagine that the protests will be very well attended.
Now, he got off the hook on the Stormy Daniels, didn't he? I mean, they have tried to kill him, but they've also tried judicially through lawfare to destroy him. And that, to a remarkable degree, has all just run into the sand.
Oh, it's far worse than that, because it's backfired. I think they turned Donald Trump into a sympathetic figure. I think there were a lot of people in this country who saw it as lawfare. People who understood the charges were baffled as to how any prosecutors could go forth with some of these absurd charges. So ultimately, I don't think that these were effective, and they backfired. Additionally, I think they'll backfire because I think they infuriated Donald Trump. I think here we are a week and a half before he becomes president, and he got one last punch to the face. So I think Donald Trump's going to come in with some residual anger, and hopefully he will have people do deep investigations, deep dives. I'd like to know about the connections between these prosecutors and the people in the White House to see if, in fact, these prosecutions were local, or if they were, in fact, instigated by people very high up in the Biden administration, which I suspect. I also think that Joe Biden is going to be issuing a lot of pardons over the next, they're talking about that over the next week or so. But I don't think that the Trump administration should refrain from investigating the people that have been pardoned. Even if you're not going to charge them, if you can't charge them, the American people deserve to know the truth.
Yeah, exactly. I've actually sent him a long list of things that he should do in that regard. Investigate things, starting with the, I believe, fraudulent election of Joe Biden 4 years ago. I don't know if he'll ever read it, and if he does, whether he'll ever act on it. But I'll add that point that you've just made to the list. Garland Nixon, radio talk show host, political analyst supreme. Always a delight to see you. And I'll look out for you on the television at the inauguration.